Dear sporting friends, during these challenging times of COVID-19, sport has the power to keep us all physically and mentally healthy and connected. Now, more than ever, we need to use the spirit and values of clean sport to overcome this global challenge together. And that is why I'm more than happy that regardless of the current unpredictable landscape and difficult circumstances, the organizers of the virtual youth festival have found a way to gather youngsters from across the world around this initiative once again and keep them active. I would like to congratulate and thank United Through Sports and AIM's president, Mr. Stefan Fox, for this initiative combining sport and education in this virtual World Youth Festival. WADA is very proud to be a part of it. Sport is a beautiful idea. Perhaps it is the world's last movement with the power to unite people, no matter what their political views, religion, skin color or age, but only clean sport. This must always be protected. When I talk about fair play, I'm not just talking about doping, but unethical conduct of any kind. People must always be able to believe in sport as a pure and noble ideal. WADA strives with its partners to build a world of clean sport. And education is key to empowering athletes and their support personnel to play true. It was inspiring to witness your opening workshop on 18 November with all those young participants. It really showcased to me that the sporting youth of the world generally wants to be part of the fair play movement. I would like to once again congratulate the organizers here today and thank them for including so many important topics within the education program. So, today's panel is about fair play in sport, with the panelists coming from WADA, ITA, the IOC, IPC and the Sport Authority of Thailand. I strongly believe that such initiatives are an important step towards creating a more accessible and inclusive future for everyone, especially young people. The slogan of this festival is "One Spirit, One Heart." We are united through the spirit of fair play. Let it guide us. Good luck, and I look forward to the day when we can meet together in person once again. Thank you very much.
It would probably be more education and more information about how to protect myself about inadvertent doping. I was tested for the first time in Beijing during the Olympic Games and I was in total panic. I just realized how much of a threat doping could have been to my career as a whole, but to my integrity as a person as well. Think about it. You become an athlete or you are involved in sport because you believe in certain values. Some of those values can be equity, fairness, or inclusion, for example. All of that can be jeopardized if you're involved with doping. So for that, I'm happy to contribute to the work of WADA. WADA, as you know, is the World Anti-Doping Agency. It is the global regulator in the fight against doping. draft and monitor what is called the Bible of anti-doping rules, the anti-doping code that applies to all sporting organizations. The work of the WADA Education Department is to draft the best educational programs to protect you when you have to make the right decision if you were to be confronted with the temptation of doping. So it's about having educational tools for you, but also for all the people that are around you and can help you make the right decision at the right time, such as your parents, your doctors, your coaches. So there are educational tools available for you online already. For example, you have the WADA quiz that you can take. You have also the anti-doping e-learning platform on which you can go and play games while learning more about anti-doping rules. And finally, because doping in sport is a collaborative effort, you can also show the world why you have decided to play through every April 10th by taking part into the playthrough campaign with the hashtag playthrough. So what would you play through for? I play through for staging the best and cleanest playing field for you and the future generation. So I hope to see you on April 10th, and in the meantime, please stay safe and enjoy your festival. So promoting athletes' voice and athletes' interest has been an easy fit for me. As a former athlete, I really believe that athletes have unique skills that they can bring into the world and make the world a better place through sport. Back in 2013, I was selected as an Athletes Commission member for ANOCA, the Association of All National Olympic Committees of Africa. So it started by setting a mission and a vision. So our mission was to inspire, empower, and give a voice to athletes, and our vision was to support them on and off the field of play. I believe that athletes have unique skills. It's about bringing them into light with the right tools. So when it comes to promoting fair play while doing that, I believe this is quite easy because athletes already have certain values that entails that they are involved with sport, such as fair play, such as fairness, such as excellence, such as respect, such as friendship. So it's about enabling them with the right policies to express themselves. One of the key documents that we have launched with the WADA Athletes Committee, for example, is the Anti-Doping Rights Act, which inform athletes about their right, but also their responsibility when it comes to doping in sport. I believe that this is the way forward in empowering athletes by endorsing such documents and ensuring that athletes' voices are heard, that athletes are represented across the sporting movement in all the decision-making process that will impact their life on and off the field.
Well, thank you very much for the question. There were so many things that we had to consider when we were drafting the athlete declaration. What were the most important rights to include? And we had a lot of discussion about the themes that we would capture and how they would relate to the values of Olympism, friendship, respect, excellence. We wanted to engage with all athletes and athlete representatives so that they could have a voice and tell us what mattered most to them. So we did this by doing a survey, and the results were really interesting and helped to shape the first draft of the declaration. 97% of athlete reps told us that clean sport and integrity was important to them. 90% said communication, good governance, and athlete career transition were also important. At the same time, we consulted with other stakeholders to understand what was happening in the world of human rights generally, what WADA was doing, and what other athlete representative groups were doing in this space. We also looked at the key features of other charters, so using clear, easy to understand language and framing things in terms of broad principles. We also had to think about the kind of support we needed, how to bring it to life. How could we make this meaningful? So we took the charter to the Sport Accord and to the IFs, and we spoke to the WADA Athletes Commission, and the document was supported by the IOC Executive Board and is now part of the charter. And that reinforces how important it is in creating a world that is better for athletes. We also had to consider the social media and marketing elements in order to increase awareness of what we were doing. We had to ensure that all the stakeholders and decision makers were informed about what we were trying to achieve. We also had to consider the future and how to ensure that the declaration remained relevant and kept changing with the times so that it always remains something that is true to athletes and represents athletes' views. So the structure is in place for this to happen, and the Athletes Declaration will continue to evolve over time. If you're interested in learning more about how the Declaration was created, please check out Athlete 365 at www.olympic.org/athlete365/athlete declaration. Thank you. Well, I think that the first point that I would make on this question is that I think the concept of fair play has always been around. If anything, what's changed since I was competing is that the concept of fair play has got bigger, it's broadened, and social media has meant that more people are talking about it, and there's greater awareness of issues such as anti-doping. There's been a lot in the media about anti-doping and the efforts that are taking to make sport clean for all athletes. The prevention of manipulation of competitions. What that means is that athletes or officials, they cheat in some way to affect the outcome of the game, and it might be to lose in the first round so that the second round is easier. And athletes need to know what to do about that and how to resist it. And so, that's another area that probably wasn't something that we thought about when I was competing. Gender equity is another big one. Sport is one of the most powerful platforms for promoting gender equality. And in recent years, there's been a lot of work done in this space to encourage women to participate in sport, to address the balance of sports in the Olympic program, to ensure that women have an opportunity to be involved in leadership. There's still a lot of work to do, but this is an area of fair play that's expanded since my time. Another area I think that has expanded is the idea of a dual career. And so athletes today are really aware that they have a right to not only compete, but also to have an education and to be supported as they transition out of their sporting careers. And this is an area that I believe has become more important, and there is this growing awareness that sports have a responsibility to look after their athletes once their competition days are over. Another area of fair play that I think has developed recently is the notion of inclusivity and diversity and accessibility. Sport has an incredibly unifying effect, and now there is greater awareness that you see through the initiatives of the IOC to have the refugee team and to start representing people who are, transgender and different sexual development, and people with disabilities, and it's how do we include those in the international sporting scene? These are all areas in which I think fair play has changed since the days when I was competing. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much. And yes, you're absolutely right. Olympic movement really reflects how important it is to have fair play, not only in sport, but also in life. Thanks to their values of excellence, friendship, and respect, we are trying to teach every athlete and everyone who is involved in sport how important it is to respect others, to try and strive for excellence, and of course to be friendly. And when we're talking about the challenges of fair play and integrity of sport, there is a lot of reasons why we should more than ever remind everyone of the values of Olympism and fair play. There are threats to integrity of sports, like doping or cheating or lack of understanding of these values, and that's why it's really important to teach kids that to respect the others, to follow the rules, and to be the best without really helping with any kind of help which is not allowed to achieve the victory. It really doesn't matter, and it really doesn't give an added value to that victory. I think the most important is to teach kids that when you win, when you want to be the best, first of all, you need to be a good person. You need to follow the rules, you need to respect the others, respect yourself, and then we can all compete in harmony and knowing that no one is helping him or her with something that is not allowed. So I think that's really important. That's why respect to the rules and fair play is so important in sport. And then it transfers to the daily life as well. I believe we all know that if kids do sport and have a great examples of their parents and teachers teaching them to follow the rules, play fair, play clean, I think that transforms into the daily life where we all realize that it is important to be good people. I've been in a professional sport for 25 years, and I can say that you see the gestures of fair play in an everyday sporting life. I mean, even if you see a simple gesture of competitors shaking hands, appreciating the achievement of the other one, I think that just shows the respect and upholds the values of fair play, which we really need in this world. But when I look at how the most important cases of fair play, which played an important part in my life as well, were when I witnessed the medal reallocation ceremonies of some of the athletes or the teams. Unfortunately, they lost their medal moments or the podium moments during the games and during the events. But at the end of the day, after a couple of years when some of the dopers were caught cheating and finally the justice was served, these athletes were able to recover those moments. For the nice ceremonies that I experienced in the Olympic museums or during some of the events such as World Championships, it was amazing to see these medals being reallocated to the athletes who finally knew that they deserved them. They were good enough to get the medals, and they played fair. So that's why they deserve those medals. And it doesn't look like that, but these moments are super strong and really important. And I can only say that I had tears in my eyes to see how satisfying these moments were for the athletes. So I believe it's important to realize that playing fair and respecting the others, respecting the rules, just is so important, because if you were caught cheating, the first thing is that the truth will come to light every time. The second thing is that you can't really enjoy your victory knowing that you cheated, because you still have some feeling that it might really come to light. And at the end of the day, I think it just devalue the value of the victory, because you don't feel like the victory was achieved doing the best and playing fair. So these were the moments I really treasure in my life and motivate me to really go for fair play, do play fair and do play clean. And I think that's the message I would like to convey today.
When it comes to para athletes, there are definitely significant needs that might be a little bit different than their non-disabled counterpart athletes when it comes to anti-doping. The first big thing that really comes to mind for me is the idea that athletes with disabilities tend to take more medications, which may require therapeutic use exemption forms, or TUEs, from medical doctors for them to be able to take their medications that they require day to day to control the symptoms or their disability in general. So that's a really big piece, that education for athletes with disabilities needs to be heightened when it comes to anti-doping and TUE use forms, and then athletes actually submitting them on time so that they don't get dinged with anti-doping rule violations. I think the next big thing when it comes to anti-doping and para-athletes that might be different is just the special needs that might be required for an athlete with a disability when it comes to the actual process of going through an anti-doping process. That could be an athlete who's visually impaired, like myself, for example, where the athlete may need support when reading the documentation and the forms that you need to sign, or collecting their sample, or putting it into the A or B bottle and actually securing it, since you can't necessarily visually see things as well. If you have dexterity issues or you're nonverbal, you may also need help with the actual anti-doping process to advocate for yourself, or to actually seal the bottles off, since that is the responsibility of the athlete. And some athletes might not have that ability to physically turn the bottle to actually close it. So there are different needs. And then, of course, I guess the other one that we need to consider, and these are just a few examples, would be the idea that some athletes may be catheterized for their urine, to collect their urine, versus when you give a sample on a toilet. So the ability to actually collect urine through the sample process might be a little bit different for para-athletes, and that's something that needs to be considered when doing testing with different groups of disabilities within the para-athlete network. But those are just a few things that need to be considered when it comes to anti-doping processes in para-athletes. Fair play to me really encompasses a lot of different things with sport. Whether it's the ability for athletes to actually have access to training facilities and proper training equipment. And that could be simple things like a bathing suit for a swimmer and access to a pool, but it could also be the use of adaptive equipment based on the disability and the support you may require to compete in your sport. So maybe it's a running leg or a wheelchair for a wheelchair racing or wheelchair basketball. All of these things are definitely different components around the world that might be implemented differently when it comes to fair play. I think, of course, when it comes to anti-doping, that's a huge component of fair play. And ensuring that all athletes who line up on the starting line, of course, are drug-free or they've gone through the proper therapeutic use exemption process to be able to declare the drugs that they're on, the medications that they're on to be able to compete in sport. Of course, when it comes to parasport, the classification code is a huge aspect of fair play as well. Ensuring that athletes that are competing within a certain classification rightfully belong to that classification and they're not either too disabled for a class or not disabled enough to be able to compete into a classification. That, of course, falls into fair play as well. And I think when we look globally at fair play, one of the really big aspects that we need to consider is just access in general, and that a developed nation may have more access to facilities and different types of mechanisms to allow athletes to be able to compete in sport. And that for para-athletes and people with disabilities, the support for an athlete to actually get involved in sport will be very different from nation to nation. So in some developed nations, for example, I'm from Canada, so our access to sport is quite open and free. But in many other nations where it may not be as open or as developed as a nation economically and inclusivity-wise, there may be some barriers that don't allow athletes to be able to leave their house or compete in sport. And that also applies for some nations that may not be as supportive of women competing in sport or getting girls involved in sport. So fair play really encompasses a broad range of areas that are really important to me to try to help advocate for the rights of athletes with a disability to have better access, better equipment, more equal equipment to their counterparts from different nations. And then how can nations work with other nations? How can the developed nations work with developing nations to help grow the sport? And how can the IPC and the Paralympic movement, for example, ensure that fair play crosses all of our members of the IPC, so the National Paralympic Committees, giving access to all athletes that ability to be able to compete in sport and use sport as a tool for inclusion and to really drive the inclusion agenda.
First of all, let me say Sawasdee Krap from Thailand. The current Thai constitution actually states that all Thai citizens must be able to have some access to sport, be it to play it in recreational, amateur, or professional capacity, to watching the games, either live or through medias, and even to study it in subjects that are related to sports, such as sports science or sport nutrition. We feel that much can be gained by participating in sport, and this is evident from the number of events, international and national levels, that we host in this country each year. The government is very keen to host as many international sporting events in as many sports as possible. Now, since the spirit of sport teaches us respect, both for the rule of the games and to other participants, teaches us fair play, teamwork, promote better health, both physical and mental, and, and also brings people together regardless of gender, race, religion, even political standing. We feel that these are values much needed in society today. And sport happens to be a fun way of actually introducing these values to our youth. So we find that value-based education is key for this. And for that to be effective, it has to be introduced at a very early stage in life, in much the same way that you learn to pay respect to your elders very early on, or you learn to appreciate your mother's cooking, which is always the best anywhere. Thailand is working towards introducing these values through sport very early on, both in school and outside of school. And we hope that by teaching the youth of today to have respect for the rules, for each other, to know that effort are required to be put in if you want to achieve a goal, to realize that discipline is very important in life, especially if in your working career, and to look after their physical and mental health properly, to consider that cheating is actually a destructive force in society. Putting all this together, we hope that the youth of today can achieve their desired future and career, but in a proper manner. Well, there are three main programs that we consider to be vital to the prevention of doping in sport. The first one would be the education programs given to athletes and their support personnel, the parents, if they're young athlete, and the general public, so that they can keep an eye out on wrongdoers. The second is the testing program, which is now intelligence-based and very targeted, focusing on out-of-competition tests. And the third is the result management program, where those who have violated the anti-doping rule violation are punished appropriately. In education, we find, while information are available everywhere, online especially, the athlete and the support personnel were struggling to absorb the information, because there's a huge amount that they have to know. So we are now concentrating on the personal approach, a more personal approach, whereby our elite athlete, those who are most at risk, and their support personnel have to actually sit down with our educator and go through all the aspects of anti-doping properly. And they do a test after to make sure that they understand what's going on. The challenge there is that it's very time consuming. It's a process that takes a lot of effort from the staff, and you can only do it with a small amount of people at a time. But since COVID-19, we've been doing this on a virtual basis. So, and we find that it's very, very useful. So we will be carrying a lot more of these lessons online from now on. DCAT put a lot of emphasis on the younger athlete who may unknowingly use prohibited substances, which can be found in food supplement and over-the-counter drugs, and those are the main challenge that we face. Testing is essential as a deterrent, of course. So, but testing is a technical process and quite expensive. So the challenge there is to allocate an optimum number of tests where the deterrent effect is wide enough and big enough to cover all the people who are using or trying to use prohibited substances and method. And anti-doping rule violation does not mean only positive result from urine or blood tests. There's another 10 rules that you can break. For instance, you can be in possession of the substances. You can be punished for not providing a sample or not providing whereabout information so that you can be tested at all time. This is another challenge for anti-doping organization to keep tracks of all this. Doping in sport is a global problem, and the biggest challenge is for all of us to act locally in a harmonized manner in order to combat that. So cheating is something we must stamp out, and we do this basically to save the health of our athlete, and so that in the end you can appreciate sport in a proper spirit, which was meant to be enjoyed.